Hi, I'm Guy Powell, and welcome to the next episode of the backstory on the Shroud of Turin. If you haven't already done so, please visit guypowell.com and sign up for more episodes. I am the author of the just released new book, The Only Witness. It is a historical fiction tracing a possible history of the Shroud over the last 2 millennia. Today, we'll be speaking with Mike Pietrzyk. He is a syndenologist since 2017, and he has spoken widely about the Shroud. So let me tell you a little bit more about Mike. He is a converted businessman. He's met and been influenced by Barry Schwartz and Father Spitzer and many others. He's been a self-educated Shroud scholar and has presented on the Shroud numerous times. And he believes the man in the Shroud represents the torment and suffering that Jesus endured for us. Everyone has to make his or her own faith conclusion. And he states in his conclusion of his presentations that his goal was not to convince the audience the man in the Shroud is Jesus, but that they come away with a deeper awareness of Jesus suffering for them. No question that Jesus suffered for us. What's reflected in those four gospels is just incredible, and what's reflected from those four gospels onto the Shroud is just incredible. So, Mike, thank you and welcome.
Well, thank you very much for the introduction. I just got maybe one minor correction. I don't know that I'm a scholar. I mean, I'm self-taught. I've looked into the Shroud and I've studied it. I still tell people, as often as I've done presentations, that I still consider myself a novice. And I haven't gone through any training per se or seminars. It's just a lot of work that I've done and investigation. But I think I'm still short of a scholar, but I think I'm a pretty good novice.
Well, I think you're probably a full-blown scholar, given that if we kind of shade the definition to be someone that's learning, then and constantly learning, then we're both scholars. Because I agree with you. The Shroud is so complex, and there is so much to understand that that I think there's nobody. There's maybe a couple of people, but there's really very, very few that really understand it to, maybe even 95, 99%. I mean, I learn something every day. It's just a fascinating topic.
Well, hopefully maybe you invite me down to your parish, your church, and one day I can give a presentation to your congregation.
Would love to. That'd be fantastic.
Right.
So thank you. So tell us how you got involved in the Shroud. What is your backstory on the Shroud of Turin?
Well, my previous work, I am retired now. I've been retired for a couple of years, but in 2018, my territory was Virginia and West Virginia. So I did a lot of traveling by car. I leave on the road by Monday, come back home Thursdays or Fridays. A lot of hotel time, a lot of travel time. But I just had the urge to look up the Shroud of Turin in my off time. So I finished the day at work, go back to the hotel, and I turned on the computer, and I started just dibbling into it, looking at it and reading about it, and I just got more excited about it. So my interest was self-generated. And I just had a lot of time on the road hotels to go into the computer and look at it. As I found out that the two main emphases of the Shroud that just got to me are the two main aspects. One is the scientific aspects. That is, the light brown image is a photo negative. So when you take a picture of it, you get an image of the man. And then that image of the man, when you put it under a VP8 image analyzer, you get a correct 3D image. So that's the scientific aspect. And I was thinking, wow, I mean, how does that happen? And today, scientists have no explanation. And here we are in the 21st century. The second part is the black and white images of the man that represent a man that was crucified, scourged, crown of thorns. And it's just very detailing that is an example, a 100% matching of what Jesus went through. And my faith and belief in the Lord, it just drove me more to find out more about this, the truth about it, or to understand it, so I can draw closer to the Lord. And I just kept learning more. I've read 5 books on the Shroud, different authors. I went to a presentation by Barry Schwartz, late 2018. My wife and I went up in Northern Virginia from that presentation, I was able to hook up with him afterwards, and we have maintained a great relationship over the years. I've become very good friends with him. I won't say best friend, but just I email him every month. We communicate. He's called me a couple of times. So that is just that over the years of getting information, and all of it's been self-driven, I felt a desire to give a presentation. So I reached out to Barry Schwartz at shroud.com, and he gave me the approved slides. I formatted my own presentation, and that's really maybe the sum of how I got into it.
Yeah, and Barry is he is definitely one of the best champions for the Shroud, and he's done so much for it. And I met him out in Houston, and what a nice guy. And he gave such a when I met him, he was speaking and presenting on the Shroud, and he gave such an entertaining speech on it and on what he did at the during Stirp and everything. It's pretty
Yeah,
fascinating.
a phenomenal man, phenomenal man. I have a great appreciation for him. He is the number one Shroudy, so he's the main guy.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right. He definitely is, and it's so funny too. He's Jewish, or maybe I think he claims to still be Jewish, but I think he also to maybe 99.9% believes that the shroud is the authentic burial cloth of Jesus Christ. So I don't know exactly how he reconciles the two, but it's always good to get his input and hear him speak.
Yeah, he says he's not a Christian. He's still Jewish. He knows that maybe that disappoints Christians, and they're be praying for him. I don't think he needs to be prayed for. I think he's found his route to heaven. But he does believe that it is the burial cloth of Jesus. He just doesn't know whether or not Jesus is the Son of God per se, as I understand it. But still, it doesn't matter. He's professing a risen Christ.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And and I like, the way you talked about, Jesus and everything. I just gave a sermon and this last weekend, and I just love the way the Old Testament with Isaiah and where he talks about pierced for our transgressions and bruised for our iniquities, and it ties into so much of what your message was, and how you then leave your presentations with, in terms of, at the conclusion, they know that Jesus died and suffered for us so we could be saved. And what more, beautiful of a statement could anybody make? So I appreciate what you're talking about there.
Yeah, it's a culmination. I tell people also in the closing remark, it's a culmination of God's love for us that He put His Son up to go through that. I mean, it's like wow.
Yeah, yeah, and it is really a wow. And when you look at the shroud itself, I mean, on the one hand, it's very contemplative when you're just looking at it and seeing that image and understanding how much love he had for us. But then, of course, the suffering that he had with the bruises, the piercing, the cap of thorns, and the whipping, and the everything else that he went through. It's just it's incredible.
It is. That is the more I keep every time I do a presentation, I am just drawn deeper and deeper into what it means. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Same here. Same here. So you have now also written two books. Tell us about both of them.
well, in 2015 range, I had family members who decided to announce that they're atheists. And it was quite shocking for my wife and I. It's like, well, how can this be? And I won't go into details of the family members. Regardless, it's still very, very close people. And it sort of set us back like a punch in the stomach. And there was also the challenges as to why I believe in what I believe, and challenges to my faith that was being put at me. So I had to sit down and think through the process of why do I believe what I believe. And the first book is 1+1 = God. And that was a summary of, first of all, two parts. One is why I believe in the scientific aspects, that there is a creator, and a creator who formed us and formed this universe. And then the second part would be my belief in Jesus, and that all the documentation of that he existed. First of all, on his existence, that they cannot deny, that the other side cannot deny that Jesus existed. He existed. And then the research of all the spiritual aspects of Jesus and his apostles. So it was a confirmation of maybe what I believe. In that first part as well, I came away with something very powerful that came to my mind in that 1+1 = God, and that is the creation of this universe. That there's an evolutionary process. And evolution is a process used by God in time. Evolution does not have a mind. Evolution doesn't have wisdom. It doesn't have a spirit. It doesn't have a heart. It doesn't have any understanding. It's nothing more but a process used by God in our development. The second book was written in 2017. That was Jesus is the Way, the Truth, and Life. Atheism is Lost, Lying, Death. So that book was a little bit more going after the atheist position. It's also an extension of my beliefs of the first book, but it represents two choices that we have. The choice of that Jesus is the way, truth, and life. You just simply believe in him, you do your best, or you ignore Jesus and deny him. And taking Jesus into your heart is a way to heaven. Ignoring Jesus and turning your back on him is a way of eternal condemnation. I've drawn some criticism from my atheist friends and family members because in the second book, I state that if you are against God, you are on the side of Satan. Now, that does not mean they're evil people. I mean, atheists can be good people. There are good people out there. But if you turn your back on God, you have total denial of him, then you are on the side of Satan, and he's cheering you on. I think as I go back, I look at these two books I've written, I am sometimes awfully surprised by what I've written. And I have to give credit to Holy Spirit, because I open up these books and I read these chapters and I say, did I really write that? The continuity of the topic, what it means, what I'm trying to get across. I'm in the process of making notes on a couple more books. I won't go into that right now, but I've got some other thoughts I think I would like to express. But I give credit to the Holy Spirit for his guidance. I do not take any credit for any of the writings that I've done. So,
yeah. And I as a matter of fact, I mentioned I did our sermon in our church for our church this Sunday, and I talked about what God or the Holy Spirit did for me to get me to write the book, and it was really 20 years ago that I got that. I called it a nudge. He gave me a nudge, and it was that nudge that actually led me to write the book. And then to your point as well. My brother, when he read the final version of it, he picked out about 10 different quotes out of it, and I was amazed. I said, "Oh, I wrote that? Did I write that?"
yeah.
And and I said to myself, no, I may have put it in paper, or it may have been my fingers, but it was God that really was the inspiration, and he was nudging me the whole way with different words and inspiring me. And so I definitely see exactly what your point is there.
Well, I think what's going to be great is upon our passing, we've got something we've left behind that will always be there. Besides, maybe some memories, but we got more than memories. And not that I'm taking credit for it, but it's just, I think it's a beautiful thing that we've honored the Lord by what we're trying to do. And I hope to continue that in my efforts of public speaking.
Yeah. Well, thank you, and definitely, and we'll talk about hopefully where we can have our readers find your book and be able to also inspire them with your writing. So let's go back now to Jesus and the crucifixion and the shroud. Tell us some of the ways that he suffered. Tell us what you see as the things that he suffered for us.
Well, I don't think most people understand the total torment that Jesus went through. When he was scourged, his body was shredded into basically almost hamburger. The scientists had determined on the back side, he had about 240 wounds from the scourging of the Roman flagrum. 240. The frontal side, he had about 120. And if they recall in the Bible, when they gave him the crucifix, the beam to carry, he couldn't carry. He was falling down, and they had to get Simon, some Syrian, who came in from the fields to help him because they thought he was not going to make it. So Jesus, upon his crucifixion, he was basically maybe half dead already. So he had lost a lot of blood. He was under a lot of pain, a lot of torment. And then when you look at or think through the nailing of the cross to the wrist, his nail going through his feet, crushing his feet bones, hanging up there on the cross. Now, also, people may not realize this, but he was crucified naked. They did not give him any special consideration. He was scourged naked because if you look at the images of the black and white images, he's got scourge marks all over his buttocks, which means that he was stretched out and he was scourged from his shoulders always down to his feet with nothing on him. So the totality of his torment was just horrible. And the fact that he took that upon himself for our sins is just you can't take it in. So therefore, when every presentation that I go through and I talk from his head down to his feet, and I identify that his face was disfigured. Both eyes were swollen. His right eye was closed. His right eyelid was torn. His nose was out of line. So his cartilage in his nose was broken from being punched. His facial beard was pulled out. All that just on his face. And it talked about where that most of that was done by probably the Pharisee guards when they had him, and they just took it out on him when they had a chance, when he said, "You'll see me sitting at the right hand of the Father." And they said, "Okay, you referred to blasphemy." And then they went ahead and began to beat up on his face. So it's just it's hard to put in words what he did for us, and just talking about the images reflects upon, I think, his love for us, for him to do that for us.
Yeah, I think you're right. And he prayed before the crucifixion in the Garden of Gethsemane for 2 or 3 big sets of prayers. Went back to his disciples, and they were falling asleep, and then he reprimanded them for that. And he was praying so hard that blood is coming out of his face, his sweat, and if he didn't want to do that for us, he could have ran off. He
Right.
could have run off. He could have run off at that point and said, "No, I'm not going to do that." But he decided consciously, he and God, and through his prayers, he says, "No, no, no, it is my sacrifice that he's going to do for us."
Yes, right.
Yeah, and then to your point as well, the how brutal, the Pharisee guards or the temple guards, whatever, and then of course the Roman guards, and then their whipping of him and what have you, and then the fact that normally people that are crucified actually can live a couple of days. They don't die that quickly, and he was dead within a handful of hours.
Yeah,
And
Mark, he states that Jesus was started the crucifixion at the 3rd hour, which was 9 o'clock, and then it was at the 6th hour, 3 p.m., where he died. So it doesn't mean exactly 9 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, but during that time frame of those hours, he only spoke 57 words. And I go back and I look at that. I mean, first it was as you're nailing him, he says, "Father, forgive them; they do not what they're doing." I was contemplating on that. I think before Jesus asked the Father to forgive them, he had to forgive us. He had to first acknowledge in his heart that I forgive you, and then he asking the Father, "Father, don't take anything on them; forgive them." The next major phrase that he talks about is very, for me, compelling. And I don't know if people really take time to think about his words, but he had time to have closure with his mother. Now, Mary was at the foot of the cross, and she was probably only maybe 10 feet from him. It was not like the cross was way high up in the air. But him looking down at her in his disfigured face and his body, and she's looking at him. What a terrible way. But his closure with her saying goodbye is, woman, here is your son. And to John, son, here is your mother. It is because a year ago I had a chance to say goodbye to my mother, but certainly it was so easy. She's at the bed and she knows she's dying, and we know she's dying, and I love you, you love me. And what a way for Jesus. And I think also his last moments of life, he didn't have much time left in him, but yet he still saved a prisoner. A prisoner went over to him. And here Jesus, he's going in and out of consciousness on the cross, but yet somebody asked him, and the prisoner's probably not doing very well. And he says, Jesus, remember me. And Jesus says, today you'll be with me in paradise. It's just the depth of him continuing to do what he does for us. So these kinds of analysis, I mean, I think about it, I meditate on it, I just think about the pieces, step by step, what occurred. Now, maybe I'm wrong about what I'm saying. I don't know, but I think I'm pretty close to what really happened as far as the thinking in the process.
Yeah, and I like your point of bringing out each of those sets of things that he talked about, and especially with his mother, and then asking John more or less to take care of his mother because he's no longer there. You don't pick up on that as much as you should, and I really appreciate you pointing that out.
Yeah, it's powerful. Everything, because it was 57 words. It could be 56 depending upon what Bible you have.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell people, my presentation, which is about 50 minutes, I have 6,500 words in my presentation I give to the audience. And here Jesus is nailed to his cross, probably just less than 6 hours, and he speaks 57 words. And it's just powerful.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. So, with that, what do you see as, like, for you, whether they're Shroud books or whether they're otherwise, but what are some of the best books that really stand out for you?
Well, I was able to read, I know in my books, the number of books I read. My first book, I read up to 64 books. The second book compiled up to 200. Because of my days of traveling, I was able to do a lot of audio books and listen to them many times, repeat them over. So it was easy to put a couple of books on the road and go through them and listen to them. In that compilation was probably 25 or 30 books written by atheists. So I understand their position and their thinking. And the rest of the books had to be with Christian authors and believers. But my first choice would probably be the book called God Is Not Dead by Rice Broocks. And this is an interesting storyline because, and this was back in 2015, when the announcement was made by family members, I had to think, how do I get started? How do I approach my offense or defense regarding their challenges? And where do I begin to say what I believe? So in 2015, Pam and I, we happened to be in England, going through Heathrow Airport, and I was going security, and I was being double checked. And as my luggage was being double checked, a man was standing next to me, and his briefcase was open. And in his briefcase was a couple books, and the title was God Is Not Dead. And I saw, well, this is a Christian person. I asked him, I said, is the book any good? And he said, yes, the book is excellent. As a matter of fact, I'm the author, Rice Broocks. So he gave me a copy of his book, and we talked for a couple of minutes. He gave me some guidelines, how I ought to approach myself in my beliefs and how I move forward with, because he was off to have a debate with atheists at a university. So I read that book probably 4 or 5 times, and it gave me a good basis how to start my writings. The second one would be Case for Christ by Lee Strobel. Lee Strobel was an atheist attorney his wife was Christian, and he was going to outprove that Jesus is false. And anyway, the end result was he came away saying, wow, Jesus is real. And he committed his life to the Lord. His book is powerful on the aspect of why the case for Jesus. And that was a powerful book. I used his information on various parts in my first book. The second would be I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist by Norman Geisler and Frank Turek. they do a phenomenal job breaking down the atheist beliefs and why they're so short on any facts. They do a great job, and I loved it. The fourth would be God's Double Agent by Bob Fu. Bob Fu was a Chinese person who came to the Lord. And now also I want to highlight that people in the free world, Christians, they fail to understand the torment. There are so many Christians out there around the world who are suffering because the government persecutes them. Bob Fu in China was a professor of a Christian believer, and he would have prayer meetings. But the Chinese government found out about him and went after him. And the storyline about how he was able to get through their torment, they called him in and put him in prison, what he had to do to go through that life. And again, I appreciated that. And this is another, just a side note, is that because of my understanding what Christians who are being persecuted every day in my prayers in the morning, I lift up to the Lord that he would send angels to the Christians around the world who are being tormented. I read a few other books by people who were Muslims or Islams, and they converted to Christianity and the torment they went through. But I picked up Ba Fu because it was just a reminder of what's going out there in the world. And he has a special ministry on right now. And then the fifth one would be The Persecutor by Sergei Kurtikov. The Persecutor by Sergei Kurtikov. I read this book in 1975. This book stayed with me all these years because what's important of it, and this was before I am to the phase of my beliefs and my strength in the Lord. Sergei was a communist, atheist in Russia back in the Cold War. His role and responsibility was to go out and find Christians and believers who had prayer meetings, who had church services. Him and his henchmen would go out and look for them, and they would just punish them. And some people lost their lives by the beatings and the brutality. Now, what's interesting, this is information coming from a person who persecuted Christians. So one day, he and his henchmen went to this prayer meeting. They got word of a prayer meeting going on at this home with these elderly people. They went in, they started pummeling and hitting them. And he had his own beating stick, got this woman out of the corner, and he was going to teach her, you don't pray, this is a communist country. He raised his club to hit her across the face, and she's out, God, forgive me. He doesn't know what he's doing. As he comes down to hit her, somebody from behind grabbed his arm, full force, yanked him back. Now, Sergei's a big, strong guy. So he turns around to confront whoever pulled him back, and there's nobody there. He had a spiritual experience where the angel protected this lady by pulling him and yanking him back. He knew he was fighting against God. So those are the 5 books I just sort of highlighted. There are so many other great books, but
well, your last one certainly sounds like Paul and his conversion. That's for sure.
Yeah, and I have made comments about that. He knew he had to find an excuse to stop what he was doing, and he went and got on a different job and a different boat, and he escaped to Canada. But regardless, it's just, again, the point being, this is a man who was an atheist persecuting Christians. Usually when a Christian tries to put together a story, it's nice, but this was powerful, and it's stayed with me ever since then. So
yeah, and your story is, I mean, we are so blessed to be sitting here and able to talk freely about religion, and I mean, we could talk politics or whatever, and having the freedom to be able to do so. And yet when you go around the world, and you have then the communists in Russia, or now the modern day communists or dictatorship in China. I used to spend a lot of time in China, and if I was there over the weekend, I wanted to find a United Methodist church, and I could never find one. And I thought that they had them, but you couldn't, they were blocked or whatever. and I never found one. I was able to though go to one or two Catholic churches, and they were still able to worship. Although the worship service was in Chinese, so I don't know exactly
Yeah.
what they said, but nevertheless, I was able to go and be part of that. So hopefully, it was not the Chinese version of Christianity, but the Catholic version of Christianity. So yeah, we are so blessed to have the freedom to be able to pray and talk and speak on anything that our heart desires, even whether we're an atheist or not.
Right. Yep.
Yep. So you said you also had some supernatural experiences. Tell us a little bit about those.
Well, an experience. I've heard different things in my head, particularly when I was writing the books. I mean, prominent information just popped, yelled in my head. But this was a real supernatural experience that occurred to me in the early 1990s. I think 1992. I don't remember 92 or 93, but regardless of that year. So at that time, I was a Little Caesars franchisee, and I would go to my office early in the morning. I would always be there most of the time, first one in the morning. I'd get there 7 o'clock, 7:15. Everybody else be coming at 8 o'clock, 8:30 range. And so I left home and I would get on the Blue Ridge Parkway, which is simply I go down the street and then I make a quick right. I'm on the Blue Ridge Parkway, which is a beautiful drive. It's about 7 mile drive. And it had pullouts, and the pullouts where you can pull over to your car maintenance or whatever. But I would pull over on a regular basis because we're surrounded by mountains, beautiful mountains here in Virginia. And I would just meditate and just thanking the Lord. I mean, life was good. I had a thriving business. At one time, we had 450 people in our company, 33 restaurants we owned. And it was not uncommon. I would just thank the Lord for a few minutes and get back on, pull out, and head to the office. Well, this one particular day, it's about 7 o'clock, 7:15 in the morning. Hardly nobody's on there except a couple cars. I pull over and the sun's coming up over the mountain. It's a beautiful day, and I'm just thanking the Lord for what's happening and for all the good things. So it's just me in the car by myself, and all of a sudden in the car, in a loud voice, not in my head, but a loud voice, it said, "Michael, when the black van goes by and comes back, you have to leave." Now, what's interesting is that it was a warning of what was going to happen and what I needed to do. I actually turned around like in the back seat. Okay, I'm the only one in here in the car. Where is this coming from? So I'm just sitting there pondering what I just experienced. Maybe 45 seconds later, a minute later, at that time it was probably a 1985 black Econo van with the chrome top luggage rack on top. It goes by. The back windows are covered up. I think I only saw the driver, could not see a second person. And the black van goes by. And it's like, wow, it's got my attention. And the road from that point, it's curvy. And I'm sitting there and I'm just thinking it through. Well, about 45 seconds later, a minute later, apparently this van went down, turned around, and came back. And as it came back, the approach, I only saw a headlight. Then I saw a headlight and a radiator. Then I saw a headlight and a radiator and the other headlight. So he came back, crouching up. And then when he could see me, I could see him. He went normal speed. I turned the car on. And as he pulled around the turnoff there, I pulled out and I left. For years, I didn't talk about it. I think maybe short time after I shared it with Pam, I might have told my parents, but now who's going to believe me? I have nobody convinced. I have no proof, but this was an experience that I say it could have been, the Lord, it could have been my angel speaking to me. I take a responsibility for what I've heard, and I have to think about that. The Lord blessed me with additional experience that it's phenomenal. And I have to be careful that I don't let that experience not weigh me down, but I keep the importance of what happened, because it was a phenomenal experience. Not all my family members believe it. Been told you're delusional, it didn't happen, you're changing your story. But that's exactly what happened, and I'm very thankful for that experience.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing it. Definitely a very interesting to hear a voice like that, or to your point about the story with the Russian and having that hand pulled back. God or the Holy Spirit is definitely there, telling us and giving for your books as well, giving you a nudge or even more than a nudge, but inspiring you and inspiring me to do what we've done as well. It's pretty phenomenal. So thank you for sharing that.
On occasion, after my presentations, if I feel it's the right time, I'll share that with the audience as a little secondary information. And I'll get people to come up to me and say, thank you, because I had something, maybe not like that, but and then we start sharing some information back and forth. I think people forget, I mean, we have all kinds of experience. It doesn't have to be as strong as that. It's things we see, our protection of our daily lives. Something happens to everybody.
Yeah, I think you're right. I definitely think you're right. So, well, let's get back to the shroud. And so, what do you think is like the most interesting thing on the shroud? What is it that really captures your imagination?
Well, let me try, I guess, explain. The most interesting thing about the shroud is the fact that it has not. Here we are in the 21st century. It's believed to be 2,000 years old, and it has not been duplicated. There are a lot of on the computer websites that try and disprove the shroud, and they have little different things, but until they can come up with a light brown image that lays only on top of the surface of the cloth, it's a photo negative. It produces an image of a man, and that image of the man is a 3D. That compilation of those scientific things, that is what I think is the most prominent and the crux of the matter or the material of the shroud, is that it's not duplicated. I think Paulo de Lazaro, a physical chemist, these guys with these brilliant minds, he tried to create the image on the cloth. He got something on there that was using all powerful excimer light rays or whatever.
Excimer laser. Yep.
Excimer, yeah. And he said, here we are in the 21st century. If we can't create it, how could a medieval person, or even go further back, how could they have done it? So it's the aspect, Guy, that is not duplicated today. And I don't think it's ever going to be duplicated, because I believe it is, but burial cloth. But regardless, it's not. Here we are, 21st century, and it's not duplicated. So that's what is, to me, the we got the scientific aspect, we got the picture of the man. It's a fact that is not duplicated today. So,
yeah, and I think you're, I think you're right. I mean and I don't, you wonder on the one hand, okay, so this image is supposedly made by God. That's kind of what I believe. That's what you believe. And so how would, is it the pride and the ego of man that we can think that we can duplicate something that God did? Or, I mean, I think we could probably technically reproduce how the image was made and what have you, but I don't think we will ever, because it's a godly image or a God-made image, I don't think we're ever going to be able to make it exactly the way that it was actually made. It's kind of like being able to make a Xerox. You can take a piece of, some kind of a document with writing on it, and you can make a copy and it looks almost exactly the same. But to actually get it to reproduce everything that's in that image, and I just don't see that that man will be able to do that.
Well, first, it's going to be impossible, because first of all, the blood stains are on the cloth first. So as the cloth went on the person, blood came onto the cloth, because the blood stains are there first, and then the light brown image. Now, Paulo de Zero, from his assumption that there was some energy. So the assumption is that the body of that person, I want to say body of Jesus, but that person had a burst of energy. That also correlates it to the transfiguration, when Jesus took the three apostles, Peter, James, and John, and Jesus' body had a transfiguration where his face shone as bright as the sun, and his clothes were bleached white. So there was a shine. It was a moment there where he shined, and so I believe the body had a burst of energy. We're made of atoms, and I think that's the layman's terms of what happens. So so beginning to match it up, you could have to your point, you could have a picture of a light brown, but you got to have all the other aspects. The blood on the cloth first. The blood is AB, matching it up on a figure of a man, creating an image, creating a 3D. Now, just wanted to point about the shroud. It was the 3D image that caught the interest of the scientists. It wasn't the picture of the man per se. That caused interest. But when the 3D image came out, scientists were saying, how could this be? It is the only one in the world that has a picture of a man that is a 3D image. There's none other in the world. And it's how does this happen? But it is a God thing.
Yeah, yeah. It is. It's fascinating, and how we as scientists and the kind of the royal we as scientists and trying to just understand that image and what have you is fascinating. But to actually reproduce it exactly and have somehow that energy be dispersed from this body is pretty interesting.
Yep.
And so what do you see as the next big thing for the shroud?
Well, again, I'm just a novice in the aspect. I don't think they're going to have any other testing for date testing. I think they've done it's in storage and gases. I understand a few years back they did a vacuuming on the backside, which was a mistake. I think people are have to go on faith, and they're going to show. I think the next presentation is 2025 when they're going to show the real shroud for a public viewing. I think it's going to be up to people on their own to look into it and make their own decision. But I think it's just going to be status quo as we move forward.
Yeah. I hate to say it. I think that's right. As much as I'd want to see some more testing on it and non-destructive testing, as much as I'd like to see that, I think it's going to be a ways off. And it may be that I kind of liken it to the Jews being in the desert for 40 years. The church is putting the scientists in the desert, for 40 maybe plus years to be able to do some real another round of scientific testing. So yeah, and hopefully it will be seen and exhibited in 2025. I'm ready to buy my ticket over to
Yeah,
Turin.
I would like to. We want to do that. We want to be able to do that. So
yeah, so we'll have a little meeting over there and
also.
and go from there. I'm looking forward to it. Well, with that, thank you so much for being with me today on our podcast. And for your books, where can people find and download and purchase your books?
They're on Amazon, and I wrote the books not for necessarily to make money or sell them, but more or less to profess my belief and to have that as an instrument of my presentation of why I believe in what I believe. But people would like to buy them, that would be great. I think one's $11 and one's 14 or something like that. So they're not. I think the second book, Jesus is the Way, Truth, and Life. Atheism is a Lost Lie in Death. If somebody's got a family member, that could be a good book for them to give that person to challenge them on their rationale for not believing in God.
Yeah, excellent. So it's a 1 + 1 = God, and Jesus, the way, the truth, and the life. And
Atheism is lost, lie, and death.
Fantastic, thank you. So they're available on Amazon, and otherwise, where can people find you?
Well, they can. I guess I don't have a problem with giving my email address. It's just mercymike@cox.net. MERCYMIKE. mercymike@cox.net.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Mike, and thank you, Mercy Mike. Really appreciate it. And to the audience, please stay tuned for many other videos in this series of the backstory on the Shroud of Turin. And please visit guypowell.com and sign up for more episodes. And if you like this one, please rate it with five stars. Mike, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time
today. Thank you, Guy, very much for this opportunity and allow me to profess my love for the Lord.
Absolutely. And me too. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Guy. Bye bye.